The alarm was a synthetic scream, a carefully modulated shriek designed by a committee of xenopsychologists to bypass conscious thought and trigger a pure, primal adrenal response. It clawed through the simulated chaos of the cockpit as crimson light bled over every surface, painting Kaylin's tense face in the color of freshly spilled blood. Through the viewport, the plasma storm raged, a maelstrom of incandescent gas and stellar debris rendered in perfect, terrifying fidelity. It was beautiful, the way a supernova is beautiful. A spectacle of deadly power that promised annihilation. A proximity alert added its own frantic rhythm to the cacophony, a high-pitched, keen warning of the 3 Reaver-class interceptors that weaved through the debris field. They moved with a predatory grace that was no simulation. Their flight patterns were lifted directly from data captured during the skirmishes in the Oort cloud. They were sharks scenting a wounded seal in murky water. Kaylin's hands, slick with sweat inside his flight gloves, danced across the control panel. The movements were a testament to 1,000 hours of muscle memory. But today, that memory felt insufficient. The flight sticks felt alive, humming with the tactile feedback of the Valor's simulated thrusters as they fought against the storm's violent, unpredictable currents. He jinked left, the G-forces crushing him deep into his acceleration couch as a bolt of coherent energy sizzled past his canopy. It was close enough to make the ship's virtual shields flare with an angry, golden light. The energy dissipated across the gravitic field with a low hum that vibrated through the cockpit floor, a tangible reminder of how close he was to failing again. The shield generator was a clever piece of physics, bending space-time in a localized bubble to divert energy and matter. At full strength, it could deflect a small asteroid. At 40%, it could barely stop a directed energy weapon. A voice, calm and feminine, cut through the noise, originating not from a speaker, but from the comms implant nestled behind his ear. It was Commander Eva Lane, his wing leader and the architect of this particular nightmare scenario. She had designed it herself, her tactical genius matched only by her intolerance for failure. Kaylin often suspected she took a quiet, professional pleasure in watching her pilots squirm. Lane said, "Shields at 40%, Kaylin. Their targeting solution is slaved. They're sharing data, predicting your every move. That's not 3 ships hunting you, Lieutenant. It's one mind with 3 bodies. You need to break that lock or you're scrap metal." Kaylin grunted in response, his teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. "Working on it, Commander." He thumbed a control, the icon for auxiliary power glowing briefly on his console. He diverted energy from the inertial dampeners to the aft shields, a calculated risk he'd taken twice before. The ship shuddered as the dampening field weakened, and the G-forces of his next maneuver would be brutal. But he needed every ounce of protection for what he was about to attempt. He pulled the stick back hard, sending his simulated starfighter, a sleek Arrowhead-class interceptor, into a gut-wrenching climb. The Reavers followed, their engines burning hot against the blackness of the training void, their linked intelligence anticipating a standard evasive loop. It was what he had done yesterday and the day before. At the apex of his climb, just as the fighter's momentum threatened to stall and send him into an unrecoverable spin, Kaylin did the one thing their predictive algorithm couldn't account for, because it was, by all accounts, tactical suicide. He cut the main drive. For a terrifying, silent second, the ship was adrift, a dead piece of metal tumbling end over end through space, all energy signatures vanishing from the Reaver's screens. They had him bracketed, their plasma cannons charging for a killing blow on the spot where he should have been. Then, before they could reacquire him, he fired the maneuvering thrusters in a complex, pre-programmed sequence he'd spent all night coding. The arrowhead flipped, a dizzying pirouette in the void. He was now facing the Reavers, flying backward, his ship's main cannon spitting a torrent of incandescent plasma. One of the Reavers' ships, caught completely by surprise, blossomed into a silent, expanding flower of fire, its component parts vaporizing in the sudden heat. The other two broke formation instantly, their slave targeting lock gwattered by the loss of the third ship in their network. Kalen's breath came in ragged gasps as he reignited the main drive and brought the fighter back under control. He said, "Target eliminated. Lock broken." Lane's voice returned, and for the first time, there was a hint of something other than disappointment in her tone. It wasn't approval, not yet, but it was close. "Impressive, Lieutenant. A classic Lane decouple maneuver. Glad to see you were paying attention in class. But you bled too much energy in that flip. Your core is running hot and your signature is a beacon. You're a sitting duck for a long-range strike." As if on cue, a massive energy spike registered on his console. A Reaver capital ship, previously hidden in the sensor murk of the plasma storm, had just painted him with its main battery. The simulation froze. The red lights vanished, replaced by the sterile white glow of the training pod. The word "failed" hung in the air before him, projected in stark, holographic letters. Kalen let out a long, frustrated sigh, slumping back in his chair as the cockpit canopy hissed open. He pulled off his helmet, the recycled air of the lunar training facility at Armstrong Base feeling cool on his sweat-dampened hair. For 3 days straight, he had run this simulation, and for 3 days straight, that capital ship had killed him, every single time. He had finally outsmarted the interceptors, but in doing so, he had made himself the biggest, brightest target in the void. Lane was waiting for him as he stepped out of the pod, her arms crossed over the crisp lines of her Federation Navy uniform. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of professional detachment she had perfected over a 20-year career. Commander Eva Lane was a woman carved from granite, a veteran of the skirmishes in the Oort cloud that had tested the limits of the cessation accord. She had lost her first command there, a mistake that had forged her into the uncompromising leader she was today. She saw the same reckless fire in Kalen that had once burned in her, and she was determined to temper it before it consumed him too. She said, her voice devoid of the warmth it had in the comms, "You're still relying on instinct, Kalen. Instinct is a tool, a valuable one. It keeps you alive for a few seconds. But strategy is what wins battles. You knew the capital ship was out there. It's always out there. Your objective was not to engage the interceptors. It was to mark the capital ship with a targeting beacon and escape. You let them draw you into a dogfight, a fight for your ego, not the mission." Kalen wiped his brow with the back of his glove, the sting of her words hitting home. "With respect, Commander, the interceptors were positioned to block any approach. They formed a perfect screen. I had to engage to create an opening." Lane's gaze was unwavering. There's always another way. A feint to draw one of them out of formation. A sensor ghost to make them chase shadows. A ricochet shot off that large debris fragment to trigger their point defense systems and make them reveal their exact positions. You have a dozen tools at your disposal. You chose the hammer when you needed a scalpel. The call to threshold is not a bar fight, Lieutenant. It's a chess match on a galactic scale. And you will not be the pawn that gets sacrificed because you couldn't see the whole board. She turned and walked away, her boots echoing on the metal deck, leaving Kalen alone with the holographic ghost of his failure. He hated that she was right. The call to threshold. It was all anyone had talked about for the past year, the words whispered in mess halls and debated on news feeds. 75 years had passed since the Cessation Accord, the treaty that had ended the brutal inter-system war and established the Terran Federation as a major, if junior, power in the galaxy. For 7 decades, humanity had been on probation, a galactic timeout. Confined to the Sol system and a handful of nearby colonies, our expansion had been curtailed by the elder races, the Zethlan, the Cygnian Ascendancy, and others, who viewed our rapid, chaotic technological growth with a mixture of fear and suspicion. But the Accord had a clause, a promise of full membership and access to the galactic trade routes upon the completion of a 75-year period of peaceful development. That time was now up. Today, the unified fleet was mobilizing. Today, humanity was stepping out of the shadows, ready to claim its seat at the galactic table. And the designated meeting point, the place where old treaties would be renewed and new alliances forged, was a strategic choke point of immense value known simply as Threshold. Threshold wasn't a planet or a star system in the traditional sense. It was a stable, naturally occurring network of wormholes, a galactic crossroads that connected dozens of sectors. Control Threshold, and you control the flow of trade and military power in this arm of the galaxy. It was a prize of unimaginable worth, and humanity's re-entry into galactic politics was set to begin right in the middle of it. Kalen's ship, the FNS Star Valor, a brand new Vigilance-class cruiser, was to be part of the primary task force. He was a junior pilot, but a good one, and he was determined to be ready. Later, strapped into the acceleration couch of a transport shuttle making the final burn towards the Valor. In high orbit, Kalen stared out at the Earth. It hung in the blackness like a swirl of blue and white paint on a canvas of infinite night. From up here, it looked so peaceful, so unified. It was easy to forget the centuries of conflict, the petty squabbles of nations that had almost torn the planet apart before the discovery of faster-than-light travel had forced them to unite under a single banner. The stars had a way of putting things in perspective. His grandfather, a veteran of the Inter-System War, had told him that. His grandfather's ship had been one of the last to fall at the Battle of Proxima B, a defeat that had led directly to the signing of the Accord. "We never looked up," he'd said, his voice raspy with age and regret, "until we had no other choice. We were too busy looking at each other. Don't make the same mistake, kid. Keep your eyes on the horizon." The shuttle shuddered as it passed through the cruiser's docking bay energy field, a shimmering curtain of blue that kept the bay's atmosphere contained. A moment later, magnetic clamps engaged with a solid, reassuring thud. Kalen was home. The Valor was a city in space, home to 3,000 souls, a marvel of engineering and a symbol of humanity's ambition. Its central spine was nearly 2 kilometers long, flanked by rotating habitat rings that provided a semblance of Earth-normal gravity for the crew. Its forward section was a wedge of gunmetal gray armor, bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. And deep within its heart, protected by layers of classified technology and redundant safety systems, was the warp core, a contained singularity that bent space-time, allowing the ship to travel faster than light. It was this technology, humanity's unique and volatile discovery, that had made the elder races so nervous. We had stumbled upon it, reverse-engineered it from a derelict alien vessel found adrift in the Kuiper Belt, and perfected it in less than a century. It was a power we barely understood, and now we were taking it out into the galaxy. As Kalen made his way to his quarters, the ship hummed around him, a symphony of life support, power conduits, and the quiet murmur of 1,000 conversations. The corridors were abuzz with activity, a controlled energy that spoke of purpose and anticipation. He saw Captain Elias Marcus on the command deck, visible through the thick, armored glass of the main bridge. His silver-streaked hair and calm demeanor were a stark contrast to the nervous energy of the younger crew members. Captain Marcus was a legend in the Federation Navy, a man who had held the line at the Battle of Titan's Vale with a crippled ship and half a crew. He was a diplomat as much as a warrior, a firm believer that the best weapon is a conversation that prevents a fight. He had earned his reputation for calm during the Zethlan border disputes, where his refusal to fire first had averted a war, a decision that had nearly cost him his career but had ultimately earned him the respect of both sides. He caught Kalen's eye and gave a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement that was enough to make Kalen stand a little taller. The call came 3 days later. They were 2 jumps from threshold, gliding through the silent void, when the long-range sensors picked up something that wasn't on any star chart. 3 vessels, massive in scale, were decelerating from FTL on a direct course for the rendezvous point. They weren't Reavers, nor did they match the energy signature of any known Alliance or Federation ship. They were something new. Kalen was in the pilot's ready room, trying to beat his own high score on a ridiculously simple 2D space shooter when the alert sounded. It was a low, insistent chime, different from the general quarters alarm, a sound reserved for unidentified contact. He and the other pilots of Green Squadron were on their feet in an instant, grabbing helmets and heading for the launch bays. The ship's intercom crackled to life, Captain Marcus's voice calm and steady, betraying none of the tension that must have been gripping the command deck. "All hands, this is the captain. We have unidentified contacts approaching the designated rendezvous point. This is not a drill. Set condition 2 throughout the ship. All flight crews to their stations." Strapped into the cockpit of his Arrowhead, Kalen ran through the pre-flight checks, his movements automatic. The launch bay was a hive of activity, technicians and droids swarming around the fighters, making last-minute adjustments. Through the comms, he could hear the clipped, professional chatter of the bridge crew. A sensor technician reported, his voice tight with confusion. "Contacts are holding position just outside the threshold aperture. Their energy readings are strange. I'm seeing massive gravitational distortion, but almost no thermal output. It's like they're cold." Commander Lane's voice, sharp and to the point, cut in. "Are they armed?" the technician replied. "Their weapon ports are closed, but the power signatures their cores are putting out." "Commander, they could power a small star. The gravitational distortion is a side effect of their containment fields. Whatever they're using for power, it's bending space around them." A tense silence followed. Then Captain Marcus spoke. "Open a channel. Standard greeting, all languages on file. Let's not be the ones to make the first mistake." Kalen watched the main view screen in the launch bay as it switched to an enhanced view of the 3 ships. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. Their hulls were a matte black that seemed to drink the light of the distant stars, their shapes a bizarre fusion of organic curves and sharp, geometric angles. They looked less like machines and more like something that had grown in the dark between galaxies. As he watched, a section of the lead ship's hull seemed to dissolve. It wasn't a docking bay opening. The material itself flowed away like liquid smoke, revealing a soft, internal glow. The comms officer announced, his voice strained. "We are receiving a transmission, Captain. It's not audio or visual. It's a direct telepathic broadcast. It's hitting every comms receptive mind on the ship. Patching it through is not an option, sir. We're already receiving it." A wave of pressure washed over Kalen's mind, a psychic weight that made the air feel thick. It wasn't a voice, not in any language he knew. but a cascade of pure concepts, images, and emotions. He saw fire. He saw silver ships falling from a black sky. He saw a green world turning to ash. It felt ancient, vast, and utterly alien. It spoke of a journey across unimaginable voids, of a purpose that transcended mortal understanding. It was a greeting, a query, and a warning, all at once. It was the voice of a civilization that had watched stars be born and die. Then, a single clear thought coalesced from the psychic torrent, a question that echoed in the mind of every person on the Valor, from the captain on the bridge to the engineers in the warp core chamber. Who answers the call? The arrival of the beings who would come to be known as the Shrouded sent a shockwave through the assembled fleet. The human ships, along with the vessels from the other Junior Alliance races, held their positions, a silent, tense tableau against the backdrop of Threshold's shimmering entrance. The telepathic greeting had ceased, but a palpable sense of awe and apprehension remained. On the bridge of the Valor, Captain Marcus stood before the main view screen, his face a mask of deep concentration. He had spent his life preparing for first contact scenarios, but every simulation had assumed a shared basis of communication, language, mathematics, something. This was different. This was like a mountain trying to have a conversation with the wind. Marcus asked, his voice low, "Analysis. What can we make of them?" Ambassador Valen, the Federation's diplomatic envoy, stepped forward. He was a man whose career had been built on careful words and calculated risks. But he looked profoundly shaken, his face pale. "Captain, their thoughts. They're layered, ancient. They call themselves the Envoys, messengers for a group they refer to as the Elders. They say they have come to witness humanity's return, to see if we have learned from the silence." Lane questioned, her hand resting on the hilt of the ceremonial sidearm she wore. "The silence? What does that mean?" Valen said, stroking his chin. "I believe it refers to the 75 years of the cessation accord, our period of isolation. They seem to view it as a crucible, a test." Marcus turned to his comms officer. "Have the other Alliance ships responded?" The officer replied, "The Zethlan fleet is hailing us, Captain. Their commander, Gorok, demands to know why we are not challenging these intruders. He says their presence violates the sanctity of a diplomatic rendezvous." Marcus sighed. The Zethlan, a proud reptilian species. They were formidable warriors, and humanity's most powerful and most volatile ally. Gorok was a traditionalist, a warrior who saw threats in every shadow. His species' history scarred by a betrayal from a race they had once uplifted. He commanded, "On screen." The face of the Zethlan commander filled the view screen. Gorok's scaled features were drawn tight with suspicion, his black, unblinking eyes fixed on Marcus. Gorok's voice was a low hiss, translated by the ship's computer. "Captain Marcus, your fleet hesitates. These apparitions have trespassed on neutral ground. The Accord dictates they be met with force. Why do you wait?" Marcus replied, his tone even and respectful. "Commander Gorok, these beings have shown no hostile intent. They have communicated after a fashion. To respond with aggression would be a violation of our own first contact protocols and a foolish act against a vessel of unknown capability." Gorok hissed, "Their capability is irrelevant. They are an unknown variable in a carefully balanced equation. They must be removed. If the Federation lacks the will, the Zethlan do not. We will engage." Marcus's voice hardened, losing its diplomatic edge. "You will do no such thing. You will hold your position, Commander. That is a direct order from the acting head of this task force." An attack on those ships could be interpreted as an act of war by a power we know nothing about, and it would shatter this alliance before it is even formally renewed. We will proceed with caution. Gorok's eyes narrowed, but he gave a curt nod. We will hold. For now. But do not mistake our patience for weakness. Human. The screen went blank. Marcus turned to Lane. Commander, I want a full tactical analysis. I want to know how to fight them, even if we never will. Find a weakness. To Valen, he said, Ambassador, we need to understand their history, their motives. There must be a record of them somewhere. Any legend, any myth, no matter how obscure. Valen nodded. There is one place we might look. The Galactic Heritage Repository on Cygnus X1. It's the most comprehensive archive in this sector. It contains the records of 1,000 civilizations, including humanity's own lost history from the dark age of technology. Lane pointed out, a detour now could be seen as a retreat. Gorok will see it as cowardice. Marcus countered, a blind advance is suicide. We need to know what we're facing. Set a course for Cygnus X1. Send a message to the fleet. We are investigating a historical precedent. We will return in 3 days. He looked at Kalen, who had been standing silently at the back of the bridge, having been summoned to deliver a flight readiness report. Lieutenant, Marcus said, you'll be flying escort for the ambassador's shuttle. Pick your best wingman. I want that archive trip to be fast, quiet, and completely uneventful. Understood? Kalen said, a surge of adrenaline cutting through his apprehension. Yes, sir. This was it. He wasn't just a pilot in a simulation anymore. He was part of the unfolding history. The Galactic Heritage Repository was not a building, but an entire asteroid, hollowed out and converted into a climate-controlled vault of unimaginable scale. Its metallic surface was scarred with docking bays and sensor arrays, a lonely sentinel in the glare of the blue supergiant star, Cygnus X1. Kalen kept his arrowhead in a tight formation with Ambassador Valen's shuttle, his wingman, a cheerful, freckle-faced pilot named Mia, holding a parallel position on the other side. The journey had been tense, a series of carefully plotted FTL jumps through charted space, avoiding major shipping lanes. The silence on the comms was heavy with unspoken questions. Inside the repository, the air was cold and still, smelling of dust and old data crystals. A single, ancient android, its chassis showing the wear of centuries, greeted them and led them through vast, silent halls lined with glowing shelves that stretched up into the darkness. The android, who introduced itself as Unit 734, was the repository's sole caretaker. Unit 734 said, its voice a monotone hum. The records of the elders are sealed, classified by the First Council after the Great Schism, Valen said, producing a data slate. We have authorization from the Federation Council. The android took the slate, its optical sensors glowing as it scanned the credentials. The authorization is valid. However, the files are fragmented, corrupted by time and cosmic radiation. I can grant you access to the primary data core, but the information may be incomplete. The data core was a cavernous chamber. In its center, a pillar of shimmering light pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm. Valen and his team of historians immediately set to work, their fingers flying across holographic interfaces, sifting through petabytes of data. Kalen and Mia stood guard at the entrance, a mostly ceremonial duty that left them with little to do but watch and wait. Hours passed. Kalen leaned against a wall, the sheer scale of the place making him feel small. He thought about the shrouded, their silent ships, their telepathic voices. What secrets did this place hold about them? Mia asked, breaking the silence. Find anything interesting? Kaylin said, just thinking about how much history is in this place. All these stories, all these lives, just stored. Mia replied, her usual cheerfulness subdued by the solemn atmosphere. Better than being forgotten. My grandmother used to say that a story is the only thing that can truly live forever. Just then, a shout came from the data core. It was Valen. "We've found it! By the stars, we've found it!" Kaylin and Mia rushed in. The ambassador was staring at the central pillar of light, his face pale with shock. The pillar was no longer just pulsing. It was displaying images, ancient star charts, and lines of text in a language that seemed to shift and writhe as he looked at it. Kaylin asked, "What is it?" Valen whispered, his voice filled with reverence. "It's the first charter, a document thought to be a myth. It predates the Federation, predates the Cessation Accord. It was a pact, an agreement between the first spacefaring races and humanity." The images shifted, showing sleek, silver ships leaving a vibrant green Earth. Valen continued, his voice trembling with excitement. According to this, humanity was not a latecomer to the galactic stage. We were one of the first. The first starborn, they were called. We explored, we traded, we were part of a galactic community. Mia asked, "What happened?" Valen's face darkened. The Great Schism, a dispute over FTL technology. Humanity had discovered the warp core, a technology that was faster, more powerful than anything the other races possessed. We refused to share it, fearing it would be used for war. The other races saw this as an act of arrogance, a betrayal of the first charter's principle of shared knowledge. War broke out, a war so devastating it erased entire civilizations from existence. Humanity, facing annihilation, retreated to Sol, using our FTL advantage to create a defensive perimeter. We erased our own history. We chose to forget, to start over, rather than live with the shame of what we had done. Kaylin stared at the images, his mind reeling. Everything he thought he knew about his own species' history was a lie. They weren't the plucky underdogs. They were the fallen giants, the forgotten empire. Kaylin asked. "And the elders?" Valen said, pointing to a symbol that appeared in the projection. A starburst embedded with a compass rose. They were the architects of the first charter. They were a council of the oldest, wisest races, dedicated to peace and exploration. They brokered the truce that ended the war, but they couldn't heal the rift. They vanished into uncharted space, leaving a promise that they would return when the galaxy was ready to be whole again. Mia breathed. So the shrouded. They're the elders' messengers. Valen confirmed. Yes, and they haven't come to witness our return to the galaxy. They've come to see if we are ready to atone for leaving it. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the repository, the same piercing shriek Kaylin had heard in his simulation. Unit 734 appeared at the chamber entrance, its optical sensors flashing red. It droned. Warning. Multiple FTL signatures detected. Reaver-class vessels. They are on an attack vector. Lane's voice crackled over Kaylin's helmet comm as they raced back to the shuttle. "How did they find us?" Kaylin replied, his heart pounding. "They must have tracked our FTL signature from Threshold. They saw us as a target of opportunity, a lone shuttle and its escort." Mia reported from the cockpit. "Ambassador Valen is secure aboard the shuttle. We're ready for departure on your mark." Kaylin said, skidding to a halt in the docking bay and looking out the main viewport. "Negative. A swarm of Reaver fighters was already descending on the asteroid, their weapons spitting fire. "They've boxed us in. We can't outrun them in the shuttle. We have to fight." Mia's voice was tight with worry. "We're 2 fighters against a dozen, Kalen. Those aren't simulation odds," Kalen said, climbing into his Arrowhead's cockpit. "No, they're worse." He sealed the canopy, the familiar hum of the fighter's systems, a small comfort in the unfolding chaos. He looked at the tactical display. Mia was right. They were outnumbered and outgunned. But then he saw it. The asteroid. The repository. It was covered in sensor arrays, communication dishes, and power conduits. Massive conduits that fed the ancient systems within. An idea sparked in his mind, a desperate, reckless strategy born from Lane's words. "There's always another way," Kalen said, his voice steady. "Mia, I have a plan. I need you to draw their fire. Keep them busy, but don't engage directly. Just be fast." She asked, "What are you going to do?" He replied with a grim smile. Something Lane would call strategy. He pushed the throttle forward, and his Arrowhead shot out of the docking bay, straight into the heart of the Reaver swarm. Plasma bolts stitched the space around him, but he ignored them, his focus absolute. He wasn't aiming for the fighters. He was aiming for the asteroid. He flew low over its metallic surface, the Reavers hot on his tail. He could see the main power conduit now, a thick armored channel running the length of the asteroid. It was his target. He opened a private channel to Unit 734. "Unit 734, this is Lieutenant Kalen of the FNS Valor. I need you to do something for me. I need you to overload the main power conduit on my signal. All of it. Create a massive electromagnetic pulse." The android's monotone voice replied. "That action would disable all systems within the repository for an indeterminate period. The risk of data corruption is 97.4%. Kalen shot back. "The risk of us dying is 100% if you don't. The ambassador has the data we need. The rest is just history." There was a pause. Then the android said, "Acknowledged, Lieutenant. I will await your signal." Kalen yelled into the comms, "Mia, get clear, now." He saw her fighter peel away, accelerating towards open space. The Reavers, seeing him as the primary threat, ignored her and converged on his position. It was now or never. He flew directly over the conduit, his ship's belly almost scraping the metal. "Now, 734 factorial, do it now." The asteroid's surface erupted in a blinding flash of blue-white light. A wave of pure energy, silent and invisible, expanded outwards at the speed of light. Kalen's fighter, its systems hardened against EMP, bucked and shuddered, alarms screaming as its circuits fought the surge. But the Reaver ships were not so fortunate. Their systems, built for piracy and not military-grade endurance, fried instantly. Their lights went out. Their engines died. They tumbled helplessly in the void, dead pieces of metal. Kalen stared at the scene, his chest heaving. It had worked. He had used the environment as a weapon. He had seen the whole board. As he and Mia escorted the shuttle away from the now darkened asteroid, a single message came through on the comms. It was from Commander Lane, who had been monitoring their situation from the Valor. She said, "Not bad, Lieutenant. Not bad at all." For the first time, Kalen thought he heard a genuine note of respect in her voice. The return to the Valor was a somber affair. The information from the repository had changed everything. The crew moved with a new weight on their shoulders, the weight of a forgotten history and a profound responsibility. Captain Marcus convened an emergency briefing with his senior staff and the commanders of the Allied Zethlan fleet. The meeting took place in the Valorsunderstungeurhaberreverdum Strategic Operations Center, a holographic map of the threshold system glowing in the center of the room. Ambassador Valen presented the findings, his voice echoing in the tense silence. He spoke of the first starborn, the Great Schism, and the self-imposed exile of humanity. He explained the true purpose of the elders and their shrouded messengers, not as observers, but as judges. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Commander Gorak of the Zethlan spoke, his voice a low rumble of disbelief and anger. "Lies," he hissed, "a fabrication to grant your species a legacy it did not earn. You were primitives when we first charted this sector. We gave you technology. We guided you." Valen said calmly, "The records do not lie, Commander. They are the unfiltered data of your own ancestors and ours." Gorak countered, his gaze sweeping across the human officers. "Even if this history is true, it only proves our point. Your species is arrogant, secretive, and untrustworthy. You hoarded power once, and you would do so again. The Zethlan will not be pawns in your game of atonement. We will not fight alongside a species that betrayed the galaxy." He turned to Marcus. "The Zethlan fleet is withdrawing from this alliance. We will secure our own interests at Threshold." Marcus pleaded, "Commander, you can't. The Reavers are still out there, and we don't know what other threats might emerge. We need to stand united." Gorak said, "Unity with liars is a fool's hope." He turned and strode from the room, his officers following in his wake. A moment later, the tactical display showed the Zethlan fleet breaking formation, moving to blockade the primary supply route into the Threshold system, a route the Federation fleet desperately needed. The alliance was broken. Humanity was alone. Valen breathed, slumping into a chair. "This is a disaster. We're cut off. Our supply lines, our reinforcements." Lane's face was grim. "Gorak is making a strategic error, but a predictable one. He's acting on pride. He's established a blockade at the narrowest point of the nebula. A direct assault would be a meat grinder." Marcus stared at the holographic map, his mind racing. "We can't fight our way through, and we can't retreat. We must get a message to the shrouded. We must show them we are not the same humans who fled into the darkness centuries ago." He looked at Kalen, who had been observing the briefing from the side. "Lieutenant, you have a talent for unconventional solutions. You and your squadron are our only hope. I need you to get one ship through that blockade, a diplomatic vessel carrying Ambassador Valen. You will not fire a single shot. You will use speed, stealth, and skill to break through. Show the Zethlan that our courage is matched by our discipline. Show them what it truly means to be a Federation officer." Kalen's heart hammered in his chest. This was a mission with an almost zero chance of success. It was a flight into the teeth of a hostile fleet with orders not to fight back. It was a suicide run. But as he looked at the determined face of his captain, he knew he had no other choice. He said, his voice firm, "We'll find a way, sir. There's always another way." The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. Kalen and the 3 other pilots of Green Squadron would escort the ambassador's unarmed diplomatic courier. They would approach the Zethlan blockade at maximum speed, using the dense nebula's sensor-baffling properties as cover. But the core of the plan relied on a maneuver so precise, so dangerous, that it had only ever been performed in simulations. A synchronized micro-jump. using their individual FTL drives for a burst of less than a second. They would effectively teleport their ships a few hundred kilometers, bypassing the densest part of the Zethlon formation. The energy signature would be massive, but by the time the Zethlon reacted, they would be through. If they miscalculated the jump by even a fraction of a percentage, they could materialize inside a Zethlon cruiser or inside each other. Kalen sat in his cockpit, the silence of the pre-launch sequence a stark contrast to the storm in his mind. Mia's voice came over the private squadron channel. "Heart rate is a little high there, Skip," she said, using his squadron nickname. "You thinking about the odds?" Kalen replied, his eyes on the swirling green and purple clouds of the nebula on his view screen. "I'm thinking about the history, about the first Starborn. They flew into the unknown without maps, without allies. They did it because they believed in something." Mia asked softly. "And what do you believe in, Kalen?" Kalen thought for a moment. "I believe," he said, "that we deserve a second chance." Mia said, "Good enough for me. Green Squadron is ready." Kalen commanded, "Let's go." The 5 ships launched from the Valor, accelerating into the nebula's embrace. The clouds of gas and dust played havoc with their sensors, and Kalen flew on instinct, his hands sure on the controls. The Zethlon fleet appeared on his tactical display, a wall of red icons. Mia reported, "They've seen us. They're hailing. Commander Gorak is demanding our surrender." Kalen ordered, "Ignore it. Full power to the engines. Prepare for the jump on my mark." The Zethlon ships grew larger, their powerful forms resolving out of the mist. Warning shots, bolts of bright plasma, streaked past their canopies. Kalen's entire body was tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. 3, 2, 1. Mark. He slammed his hand down on the jump drive actuator. The universe dissolved into a blinding tunnel of white light. For a fraction of a second, he felt a wrenching, tearing sensation, as if his very atoms were being pulled apart and reassembled. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. They were through. The Zethlon fleet was behind them, their formation in disarray as they struggled to react to the impossible maneuver. Ahead lay open space and the silent, waiting ships of the shrouded. They had done it. They had broken the blockade. But as Kalen looked at his tactical display, a cold dread washed over him. 4 Federation signatures, not 5. The diplomatic courier, with Ambassador Valen aboard, had not made the jump. It was still back in the heart of the Zethlon fleet, alone and defenseless. A frantic voice crackled over the comms. It was the courier's pilot. "Our jump drive failed to engage. We're dead in the water. The Zethlon are locking weapons." Kalen's mind raced. They couldn't fight. They couldn't win. But they couldn't retreat. He looked at the shrouded ships, silent and enigmatic. They were the judges, and the trial was happening right now. He made a decision. He said, his voice ringing with a clarity and authority he didn't know he possessed, "Green Squadron, reform on me." "We're going back." Mia cried, "Kalen, that's suicide." Kalen said, banking his fighter back towards the Zethlon fleet. The mission was to get the ambassador through. "We failed, but we will not fail him. We will not leave our people behind. That is not who we are, not anymore." He switched to an open channel, broadcasting to the entire Zethlon fleet. "Commander Gorak," he said, his voice calm and steady. "This is Lieutenant Kalen of the FNS Valor. We are returning for our ambassador. We will not fire upon your ships, but we will not be deterred. You can kill us, but you will do it while the messengers of the elders watch. Show them what your honor is worth. He flew straight at the Zethlon command ship, his shields down, his weapon ports visibly open and empty. His squadron, after a moment's hesitation, formed up on his wings, a tiny spear of defiance against a fleet of warships. The Zethlon ships held their fire. Their commander, Gorok, watched the four small fighters approach, his reptilian face a mixture of fury and disbelief. He saw their deactivated weapons, their lowered shields. He saw a courage that bordered on madness. And in that moment, he saw not the arrogance of the ancient humans he had read about, but the honor of a warrior willing to die for his own. A memory stirred in Gorok's mind, a tale from his own people's history, of a lone warrior who had faced down an army to protect a sacred temple. It was the highest act of honor a Zethlon could conceive of. He looked from the approaching human fighters to the silent, watching ships of the shrouded. He understood. This was the test, and it was not just for humanity. Gorok commanded his fleet, "Hold your fire." His voice, for the first time, held not anger, but a grudging respect. Let them pass. Kalen and his squadron flew through the heart of the Zethlon fleet, the massive warships parting before them like a sea of iron mountains. They reached the crippled courier, established a magnetic grapple, and began the slow, vulnerable journey back towards the Valor. The Zethlon did not interfere. They simply watched. As they cleared the blockade, a message, clear and resonant, filled Kalen's mind. It was the voice of the shrouded. It was not a question this time. It was a statement. A single powerful concept that washed over him with the force of a revelation. Atonement. The journey back to the Valor was conducted in a profound silence. The Zethlon fleet held its position, no longer a blockade, but an honor guard. Commander Gorok had not offered any words, but his actions spoke louder than any treaty. He had seen an act of courage he understood, an honor that transcended species. The fragile alliance, once shattered by the ghosts of the past, had been reforged in the crucible of the present. On the bridge of the Valor Zauher, Captain Marcus watched the tactical display, his face etched with a relief so profound it was almost painful. He had sent his best pilots on a suicide mission, a desperate gamble, and they had returned not with a victory in the traditional sense, but with something far more valuable: respect. When Kalen finally stepped back onto the bridge, the entire crew turned to him. Their faces, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now shone with pride. He had not just saved an ambassador, he had saved the soul of the fleet. He had shown them and the galaxy what it meant to be human, not the fallen giants of a forgotten age, but a people of courage, discipline, and an unwavering loyalty to their own. Captain Marcus placed a hand on Kalen's shoulder. "You did well, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did more than well. You reminded us all what we're fighting for." As if in response, the voice of the shrouded echoed once more in the minds of every crew member. This time, it was not a single word, but a full, complex message. It spoke of the long silence, of the pain of the great schism, and of the hope for a new beginning. It was an invitation. The message concluded, "The elders have seen your choice. They have seen that the children of the first Starborn have not forgotten the meaning of sacrifice. The path is open. The threshold will welcome you. Come. Let us speak of the future." The three shrouded vessels turned in perfect unison, their strange, organic hulls gliding towards the shimmering mouth of the wormhole network. They were no longer an enigma, a threat, but a guide. Kalen looked at the view screen. at the swirling cosmic gateway of Threshold. His journey, from a frustrated pilot in a simulation to the man who had faced down a fleet, was complete. But he knew that the journey of humanity was just beginning. There were old wounds to heal, new alliances to forge, and a vast, unknown galaxy waiting to be explored. The ghosts of history would always be there, but they were no longer chains. They were lessons. Captain Marcus said, his voice ringing with a newfound hope. "Set a course, Lieutenant. Take us in." Kalen took his seat at the helm, his hands steady on the controls. The Valor, flanked by the ships of the newly restored Alliance, moved forward, leaving the shadows of the past behind. They sailed towards the light of Threshold, a unified fleet answering not just the call of a treaty, but the call of destiny. They were no longer just the Terran Federation. They were the children of the first Starborn, returned from their long silence, ready to claim their place among the stars. And as the ship slid into the vibrant, welcoming light of the wormhole, Kalen allowed himself a small, weary smile. The view from here was better than he could have ever imagined.